Shalom everyone. I am very honored to be here with Mr. Sugihara Nobuki, the son of the famous Japanese diplomat Sugihara Chiune, who saved thousands of lives during the horrible days of World War II and the Holocaust. My name is Nisimot Mazgin, and I'm a professor of Japanese studies and the dean of the Faculty of Humanities here at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And I will ask Mr. Nobuki a few questions about his father's decisions, about Nobuki-san's life, and about his experience here at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Mr. Nobuki, we are very happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Professor.
I think the biggest question that many would like to hear is what motivated your father to act differently from his surrounding? What was his motivation? What in his life, in his education, in his experiences made him decide to issue the visas and to act very differently in these horrible days?
I think it comes from his life he had in Harbin. He went to study. He received a scholarship from Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs to learn Russian in Harbin in 1920. And he saw the life in the Western style, Western manner. And at the same time, he saw also Japanese occupying Manchu. He was quite influenced, or I could say annoyed by Japanese military people, how they were treating local people, to say Chinese people. So when he saw Jewish Polish people escaping from Nazis and reaching Lithuania, he pitied them, and he saw that they had nowhere else to go until after they arrived to Lithuania. There was no other destination. He had to issue transit visa in order to exit from Lithuania to Russia and then go through Siberia by train, about 2 weeks journey, and move to Japan by ship. And after Japan, they could go to any other destination they could have, America, Australia, Palestine, or South Africa even. Motivation itself is just he pitied them. They had no place. That's it.
Did he reach the decision by himself, or did he consult with his wife, your mother? Do you think that at the highest of time he had some kind of doubts about the decision he made?
I asked my father a few times if he asked somebody. He said no, he didn't ask anybody, not even his wife. He decided by himself. But of course the government or Ministry of Foreign Affairs refused him to issue transit visa. After 3 times negative answer, he decided by himself, and he didn't want to involve his wife, namely my mother. She shouldn't have the, responsibility for that. He is the consul, and he doesn't want her to be guilty for that. He knew it was against the law.
At the end of the war, he became a prisoner at the Soviet Union, as far as we know. And later on, he lived in Japan and in Russia and other places as well. How was his life after the war? Did his decision to issue the visa influence his, leaving or left out of the foreign ministry?
Okay, when the World War finished in 1945, Russians came into Romania, where he was a consul again, and they were imprisoned for 1.5 years. Finally, they could go back to Japan in 1947. 2 months later, he was called to the ministry, and they said that please sign the resignation document here. He was so surprised, but he didn't say anything. He just signed and he left. From next day, he had no work, no job, no money. So he did many kinds of job. He worked in the port to carry things, and he worked in a textile shop in Ginza in Tokyo, who was owned by Russian Jew. He even didn't know about my father. He didn't have, I would say, satisfactory work for his ability. About 10 years, 12 years, he was quite miserable. In 1960, he was offered from Japanese trading company to be a representative in Moscow because his knowledge of Russian language was very high, since he was living in Harbin for so many years. How many years? Let's say 17 years. His Russian was better than Russian people. So the life was not easy in Moscow because he had to live alone. He couldn't bring his wife or family. He was living in a small room in a hotel, but he could work with his knowledge, Japanese, Russian, and the most important, that he could establish a good connection with official people in the government or trading companies in Moscow. So he worked until 1978, 1980. He was happy to work there. And then he came back to Japan.
And actually, Nobuki-san, I would like to ask you, how did the life and decision of your father influence your own life? I know that you came to study at the Hebrew University. If you can share with us some stories about it.
1968, my father came back from Moscow for 2 weeks in Japan. It was July, August. We received a phone call from Embassy of Israel in Tokyo that there is a new commercial attaché to their embassy, and he would like to meet my father. So my father took me to the embassy next day, and we met the commercial attaché, Mr. Nishri, Yoshua Nishri. And he showed my father the old visa he received. He was very young that time in 1940, and he was very happy to see my father, that my father saved his and his brother's life, and they could go out from Lithuania and reached Israel after a few years. So that day, it was the first time I heard about details of the story. My father issued a visa, and there was an Israeli ambassador, Mr. Baltur. He asked my father if he has any wish, and my father said if he can arrange a scholarship to study somewhere abroad, because my other brothers were studying in United States, but it was not easy to support another son financially. So the ambassador said, give me a few days and let me try to work. 2 days later, we received a phone call from the ambassador of Israel. He said he could arrange the scholarship to study in the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and also flight ticket, and also the living allowance in Hebrew University. There was a student hostel in Givat Ram. So he said, hurry up, because New Year is starting in next month, September. So I packed and took the flight in 2 weeks' time. That's the chance I had to.
When did you arrive to the Hebrew University? What was the first time?
I arrived in 1968, beginning of September.
How were your studies here at the Hebrew University?
First I studied, they said I have to learn Hebrew. Ulpan was not starting yet in the university. Then I I went to Ulpan in the city in Jerusalem for 1 month. There were many other students, immigrants and Jordanians. We learned quite quickly because I couldn't speak English. I couldn't speak, Hebrew, of course. I couldn't understand English. I could read and write, but we in Japan are not so advanced with English listening and speaking. So I learned rather quickly Hebrew, and then University Ulpan started. I could study much more. I had to study really hard on day and night. And then I entered the university, but I took an introduction course for 1 year, Mabo.
I see. And I know that you still speak Hebrew, נכון? אנחנו שוחחנו לפני כן בעברית.
נכון, אני גרתי בארץ הרבה שנים אחרי זה, בסך הכל 13-15 שנה, כי התחלתי לעבוד ביהלומים אחרי אוניברסיטה. אני למדתי רק שנה ועוד שנה בירושלים.
What a remarkable story and excellent Hebrew.
Thank you. But I forget, from time to time, if I meet Israelis on the street, I mean, in our street of diamond dealers, then I speak with them Hebrew, but I forgot many words. It doesn't come out quickly.
They must be very surprised. Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Nobuki, for this glimpse into the life of your famous father. You know, Sugiya Chiune is a name that is probably known to every Israeli these days, and it is a name that many Israelis look at and appreciate and think about it. And from my point of view as a professor of Japanese studies, it was also a kind of perhaps gateway into Japan and also a kind of bridge between Japan and Israel. I would like to thank you so much for this interview, and I hope that many more will learn and hear about your father. Thank you.
Thank you very much.